morning everyone. We are going to take a look today at making a basic cookie recipe. So if you go onto your class page, the recipe that we're going to be going through is titled chocolate chip cookies. Now I call this one a basic cookie recipe just because you don't actually have to put only chocolate chips in it. You can put in whatever you want. But what we're going to focus on is that a basic cookie is going to have softened butter or some sort of fat. So you can substitute that with margarine or oil, white sugar, brown sugar, 1 egg, vanilla, all-purpose flour, baking powder, salt, and then whatever it is you're going to put in. So we're looking at half a cup of chocolate chips. So in the case of this recipe, it would just be half a cup of something. Okay, so while you're getting started, you want to make sure you have your stations set up. Okay, so I have my recipe off to the side. Here's a cutting board. I'm going to need that for my butter. So make sure while you're cutting, you do that on a cutting board and not on the counter. Okay, I'm going to show you guys doing this in just a bowl. So I'm going to need a wooden spoon to stir that. Okay, so not everyone is going to have a mixer at home. If you do, that makes it faster, but if you don't, you can still get it done with just a bowl and a spoon. It's just going to be a little bit more difficult. Okay, so the recipe, I have my flour, I have my butter, brown sugar, white sugar, eggs, salt, baking powder, and vanilla. Okay, I have a couple different size scoops back here. Just depends on what size I want it to be. And then I got a couple baking sheets. Okay, I have Silpat, so this is just a silicone sheet. Okay, so this prevents things from sticking to it. If you don't have those and you just have parchment paper, that works just as well. Just these are reusable. Okay, so first thing, if you don't have unsalted butter and you just have regular salted butter, okay, take a look back at the recipe. It has half a cup of unsalted and then 1/4 teaspoon of salt at the bottom. If you just have salted butter, leave out the measurement for salt. Okay, it works out to be about the same. So first things first, we are going to cut the butter. Okay, so with the butter, one of the things that you will notice is that the measurements are going to be on the side. Okay, so as soon as you unwrap this, take a look at this part right here. Okay, this is telling you what the measurements are for the butter. So your best bet is to just measure it out, and you can cut a chunk off instead of trying to jam it into one of these measuring cups. Okay, so one of the things that you'll notice is that this whole block is equal to 2 cups. So if we need half a cup, we basically need to have 1/4 of the block. Okay, so sometimes this seems long, it ends up being longer than the actual block. So what I'm going to do here is just measure out half, which is about there. Okay, so each of these is 1 cup. So if I take half of that, this is going to be half a cup. Okay, this is all I need. Alright, so just put the rest of that on here. I'll save that for later. So looking online, I was reading that you can actually use oil instead of a solid fat like butter or margarine. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make one recipe using the butter, and then I'm going to make another one using the oil so you can compare how the products look. And if it works out well, the oil might actually be a better option for you if you don't have a mixer at home, because mixing with oil will be a lot easier. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to have to do is mix the butter with the sugar. So this is a little bit tough. It's still cold in here, so it's not very soft, so it's going to be very difficult for me to mix it by hand. So what I'm going to do is cut this into a few smaller pieces, and then I'm just going to microwave it for, we'll say about 20 seconds. Okay, this will help soften it up a little bit, and that'll make it easier for me to mix. Okay, so here is my microwave butter. Let's get that cutting board out of the way. So you notice here, now it's a lot softer. Okay, so I'll just mix that around. A little bit of it had melted, which is okay. As I mix this together, it'll kind of come back together and just give me my softened butter. Okay, So what I want to do next is add my sugar. So I need, according to my recipe, let's take a look at that again. Half a cup of white sugar and half a cup of brown sugar. Right, here's my half cup. I'm gonna go for the white sugar first. Okay, so when you measure it out, make sure that it is nice and even with the top. Okay, there's my half cup of white. And remember that when you're working with brown sugar, you want to make sure that you pack it in as much as possible. Okay, so we're going to scoop that. I'm just going to use the inside of the bag to squish that down. Okay, then just take a butter knife and then you can smooth that off. Okay. So now I got my half a cup of packed in brown sugar. You know that it's packed in because once you get rid of it, it should still maintain its shape. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to mix this together until it has a creamy texture. Okay. Creaming is one of those terms that you see in cooking a lot. So as we go through, I'm going to show you what it looks like so that you have an idea of what that term actually means. Okay. Let's keep mixing that together. The idea of creaming in baking is kind of a method that helps you incorporate air into it. So you want your mixture to be kind of light and fluffy. Okay. If you have a lot of stuff sticking to your spoon, that's why I got my rubber spatula, just kind of pull that off. You want to make sure that everything gets mixed together well, so it'll be more difficult if you have a bunch of stuff that's getting stuck to your spoon. Now, if you have a hand mixer at home, you'd want to use the beaters for this. If you have a stand mixer, you're going to want to use the paddle. Okay, so the paddle attachment is the one that basically looks like this. Okay. This works out in the stand mixer because as it goes around, it basically smashes everything against the side, so it helps to cream things together a lot easier. Okay, so we're starting to get there. Right, so basically what you wanted to do was mix it until you have a nice smooth mixture like this. Okay, so you can see it's not really attached to the sides of the bowl now, so this is a good mixture. Okay, so it should be nice and smooth, and it's a little bit sandy. Okay, the next thing that we are going to do, if we get onto step 3, is we're going to add our egg in. Grab yourself one egg, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to crack it off to the side here. That'll let me see if there was any eggshell that went in accidentally. Okay, we're good. Just make sure you don't get any eggshell in there. If you do, just pull it out. Eggshells tend to harden as you cook them, and that's not going to be a good thing for your cookie. Okay, so as you start mixing this, just do it slowly. Same thing if you have a hand mixer. There's a lot of liquid right now, so if you go too fast, it's just going to start spraying it all over. Okay. So mix that. Okay. Once you start combining it, you can start mixing it faster. You basically just want to keep mixing it until you have a smooth mixture again. Okay. It seems a lot more creamy now that we've mixed the egg in, but this is what you're looking for. Okay, nice smooth mixture. The whole thing looks the same, so there's no chunks or anything anywhere. So now that we have that, our next step is to get a separate bowl, and we're going to mix in all of our dry ingredients. Wait, skip step 4. So let's put the vanilla in. So we need 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Okay. So again, make sure you grab your measuring spoons. and you want to pour until it's level, so just be careful as you do that. Okay, so there's my teaspoon. Wait, skip step 4. So let's put the vanilla in, so we need 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Okay, so again, make sure you grab your measuring spoons, and you want to pour until it's level, so just be careful as you do that. Okay, so there's my teaspoon. If you get a little bit more, and that's okay, you just have extra vanilla flavor. Now, vanilla is one of those things where if you don't have it, it's fine to leave it out. It just gives your cookies a light vanilla flavor, and depending on what you decide to mix into it, you may or may not actually notice the flavor. So if it's not there, it'll be fine. So put that in and then just mix that. So that is our step 4. Okay, everything's mixed in nicely. The next thing we want to do is grab another bowl. And this is what I'm going to use for my dry ingredients. Okay, so that means we need to mix together our flour, our baking powder, and our salt. Okay, so first make sure you clean up your spoons. You don't want to get any sugar into your flour, so do that first. Okay, so get your flour, and I need 1.5 cups. So again, make sure that these are nice and level. So there's my 1/2 cup of flour. So add my 1 cup. Okay, 1.5 cups. Flour is going to be the basis for the cookie here. On top of that, I need 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. Okay, so 1/2 teaspoon. The baking powder is going to be important. That's what's going to make it a little bit light and fluffy. Yeah, otherwise, if we don't have it, your cookies end up being pretty dense, which might be okay for some of you, but it's nice to have a little bit area. Okay, so put that in there. And the last one is 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So again, if you used salted butter, then you want to leave this out. Okay. So 1/4 teaspoon is a very small amount. Okay, it's just this tiny spoon here. So you want to carefully fill that. Okay, so that's it. Now it might seem kind of weird putting salt inside of something that you want to be sweet. But the whole purpose of salt is to bring flavors out. Okay, so salt is going to be an area of your taste buds that gets activated, and it actually makes other flavors more vivid. Okay, so having a little bit of salt in there is going to make it more flavorful. Okay, it won't actually be salty unless you accidentally put too much salt in. Okay, so remember, you just need a little bit in there. So now I'm just whisking this. I want this to be well mixed in. Okay, I don't want to make the dough and then have a cookie that has a lot of salt in it or a lot of baking powder in it. I want this to be evenly distributed through the whole thing. Okay, if you don't have a whisk, just use a fork. You'll get the same results. Okay, that was our step 5. So step 6, we're going to add the dry ingredients into the other mixture. Okay. In the recipe, it might say to add water. Water isn't a necessity. It's just something that you want to add if it's a little too dry. So let's see how this works out. So just slowly start mixing this. Otherwise, the flour is going to start shooting out of there. So think back to your cookie theory. Okay, now that I've added my dry ingredients to this mixture, as I'm mixing it, the fat particles are going to start coating my flour particles. That means that as I continue to mix this, more and more of it is going to get coated with fat. Okay, so remember that flour is the thing that we use to give our baked goods structure. Okay, if we start coating them with fat, that means that they're not able to actually provide structure anymore because they're not able to absorb any liquids. Okay, so that means that if I continue mixing this and mixing it and mixing it, then my cookies are just going to start spreading out, and I'm going to have really big, really flat cookies that are going to be super thin. So the goal here is I basically want to just mix it until it's incorporated. And so I want a smooth dough like this. Okay. So everything is mixed in well together. And the last thing that I want to do is put my mix-ins in. Okay, so I have half a cup that I can mix into here. So I can either put in chocolate chips, white chocolate chips. You could put in chopped nuts if you have like a candy bar, so a Kit Kat or Reese's peanut butter cups or something like that that you chop up. You can throw that in there and that'll work out well. So you don't want to go more than half a cup. You can put a little bit more in. You don't really want to exceed that too much, otherwise there's so many extra bits floating around in here that it won't really stick together very well. Okay, so in this case, let's see what I have in the pantry. So I don't apparently have a whole lot. I was hoping to make some white chocolate macadamia nut cookies. I have macadamia nuts but no white chocolate chips, so I'm just going to make these standard chocolate chip cookies. Measure yourself out half a cup. Okay, I'll just mix those in. Alright, so just mix that together. And again, be careful not to mix it too much. You're basically trying to just get your chocolate chips evenly distributed and then you're good to go. Okay, so that should do. So the whole point of having these scoops is to make sure that everything is the same size. Okay, so you may or may not have these at home. If you have an ice cream scoop, that would work too. But if you're really trying to get things to just be the same size, all you need is a couple of spoons for that. Okay, so if I was going to use a large soup spoon, just scoop out that amount. And then you have a cookie. These would be a little bit small, but that's okay. They don't have to be huge. The idea is just to have them all the same size. You want this all to cook in relatively the same amount of time, so none of them are going to be overcooked while some of them are undercooked. Alright, so just use whatever measuring tool you have. Okay. If you don't have soup spoons or anything like that, but you have measuring spoons, same thing. You could just use, say, a tablespoon. Okay, and use that to measure out your amount. Okay, you might have to scoop it out and by hand make them into small balls, but it'll keep things consistent. Whenever I do my spacing on a cookie sheet, the thing I do is 2 in one row and then 1 in the next row. The reason I do that is I'm trying to keep them spaced out enough just in case if they start to spread out while baking. I don't want them to spread into each other, so I'm going to make sure that they are well separated to begin with. This is what my cookie sheet looks like. So even if they spread out, there's a good amount of space in between them so that they won't run into each other. Okay. For the second sheet, I used my black scoop just because I like the size of these, and I had a little bit of dough left over, so it was basically enough to make 2 cookies. So what I did instead of making 2 cookies is I broke it up and then just added a little bit to each of these. Okay, that'll make it so that I'm not putting in a pan with just 2 cookies, and this is a pretty good size. if you're using a scoop, it has a dome on it, I decided to flatten these out so that it'll have more of a cookie shape. Otherwise, we didn't mix this a lot, so there's a good chance it would have just cooked as a big cookie ball. So instead, just flatten those out a little bit and you should have more of a cookie shape. And the next step here is to just bake them in the oven. Okay, so make sure you have it set to 350 and make sure that your two shelves are far enough apart. Okay, I'm going to put one on one shelf, one on the other shelf, and then after say 5 or 6 minutes, I'm going to rotate them. Okay, so remember that the heat source is at the bottom. You want to make sure that you rotate your cookies, otherwise the bottom of one set is going to be really cooked and the top of the other set is going to be really cooked, but then the bottom or top is going to be undercooked. Okay, so rotating is going to be an important part here. Alright, so if you're going to do this as a lab, remember that your next important thing, we have all these dirty dishes, all this stuff has to get cleaned off. Okay, so make sure you have soapy water, rinse it off, and then put it into the rack to dry. Alrighty, so the timer just went off, so let's take a look at them. They've been in for about 12 minutes. At the 6-minute mark, I decided to rotate the pans. Okay. Now, just remember, you're trying to figure out if they're done. Cookies are one of those things that poking them with a toothpick isn't really going to give you any information. Okay, they don't really solidify until afterwards. So they could be completely cooked and it would still come out with some dough on it. But if you look at the tops of them, you want to make sure that it looks completely solid. Okay, if there's any wet bits, then you would know that they're not quite done. So these ones are all very dry looking. Okay, so you know that these ones are good. If it was just a little bit wet looking on top, you'd have to wait a little bit before taking them out. So now that those are done, what we are going to do is just put them on the cooling rack to cool down and solidify. Alright, so one of the things, again, is that it takes a couple minutes for them to set. So you want to make sure you wait 1 or 2 minutes before even taking them off of the pan. Okay, if you take them off too early, then they're going to split and start falling apart. Alright, so it's been about 3 minutes, so it should be good. Just remember, whenever you're dealing with a hot pan, make sure you're wearing an oven mitt or using a dry cloth. Okay, don't use a wet cloth because that can heat up really easily and burn you. Okay, so these should come off nice and easy. Right, we just want to put these on here to cool down completely, otherwise they're going to get a little bit wet and soggy. Okay. Alright, so these were the ones that I measured out using the black scoop. Right, and then these are the other ones that we use the spoons for. So you can see it didn't quite melt in for all of them, but that's okay. It's pretty much a solid part of the cookie now. So, okay. Alright, so these were the ones that I measured out using the black scoop. Alright, and then these are the other ones that we use the spoons for. So you can see it didn't quite melt in for all of them, but that's okay. It's pretty much a solid part of the cookie now. So we'll just put those down too. So remember that we decided to rotate the pans, and the reason for that was so that the top and the bottom would get evenly cooked. Okay, so if you, once you've done this, if we take a look at the bottom of our cookies, it should be lightly browned. Okay, so there's a light brown color here, and there's a light brown color here. Okay, that's going to be important because it's about an equal amount of brown. Okay, same with the top, it's the same color, and we're only able to do that because we rotated them halfway through. Okay, if we didn't, this one would probably be this, or one of them would be this light color on top, and the other one would be much darker than this. Okay, so this is the perfect amount of brownness that you want. Okay, so this is the perfect amount of brownness that you want. Okay. So while these are cooling down, I'm just going to put these at the back here. Okay. While those are cooling down, we're going to try the recipe again, but this time we're going to do it using oil. So go ahead and wipe down everything and get yourself set up again if you decide to do 2. Alrighty, so we're ready to go again. Now, if we take a look at that recipe again, we started off last time with half a cup of unsalted butter. So if we're going to substitute this with oil, one of the things you want to keep in mind is that you don't go a 1-to-1 with oil. Okay, one of the things that you'll notice is that with oil, if you put in an equal amount as what you put in for butter, your cookies are going to come out really greasy and oily. Okay, so what you want to do instead is use 3/4 of the amount that you would normally use for butter. Okay, so in this case we have half a cup. So let's pull out the old calculator there. So if we have 1/2 cup and we only need 3/4 of that, that means that we need 3/8 of a cup. Okay, there isn't really a 3/8 of a cup scoop or anything, and if you have 1/8 of a cup, that works out really good. But in this case, 240 mils is going to be 1 cup, so if we times that by 3/8, we get 90 mils. Okay, that's fine because I'm just going to use a liquid measuring cup anyway. So if you look at the side, here we go. It's hard to see. Okay, so there's the 150, there's the 100. Each one of these lines is going to be 10 mils, so I just have to go up to this line here. So just like in science, make sure that while you're pouring, you're looking at it on eye level. Okay, you want to make sure that you get up to that line. And your perspective changes when you look at it from the bottom or the top. There we go. Okay, so I'm just using grapeseed oil. You could also use canola oil. Other people were talking about using olive oil. The thing is, if you use olive oil, you just want to make sure you use a light one. If you use the dark one, it's much more strongly flavored and you're going to taste that in your cookies, which may or may not be a good thing. I'm going to mix the oil in with my 2 sugars. Okay, so we also need half a cup of white sugar. Remember again, you want to make sure that you go straight up to the line. You want half a cup of brown sugar, and every time you measure out brown sugar, you want to make sure it's packed in there, so make sure that's squished in pretty good. And then just use something flat to level it out. Okay, there's my half a cup. Mix it. Now, since this is oil, this is going to mix together a lot easier than it did with the butter. Okay. So part of the reason why we're going through this is if you don't have butter at home or you don't have a mixer, this is a much easier way to go. So next, we're on to step 3. So crack your egg again. I'm going to open myself up a little space here for the egg, just because I want to be able to see if there's any shell. Okay, take a look. Okay, there's no shell, so that's good. So I just have to mix my oil and sugar with the egg until it starts to get green. Okay, you can see that this is a lot more liquid and it's not really as creamy as the last one was. So it should be interesting to see how this turns out. So they're nice and smooth. Just gonna add my 1 teaspoon of vanilla in for step 4. Easy does it. There we go. If you ever get the chance, get yourself some nice Mexican vanilla. It's delicious. Alright, so mix that in. So our next step, we want to get our dry ingredients together. Miracles of technology, it's all done. Okay, so I got flour, I got salt, and I got baking powder. Again, make sure that you mix this together. You want to make sure that you have a nice, even mixture. You don't want to have any chunks of baking powder or salt anywhere in here. So once you have that, we're on to step 6, and we're going to add this into the mixture. Okay. So I'm thinking right now you probably want to be careful how much you mix this because it's going to be very easy to mix it together. Okay, so we'll go nice and slow. The oil is still going to do the same thing as the butter. It's going to coat your flour particles. So make sure you don't mix it too much, otherwise we're going to get really spread out cookies. Alright, so now that I'm at this point, I'm just going to add in my chocolate chips again. Cup, but my half cup's in the sink right now, so I'm going to do 2/4 cups. Right, there's 1/4 and 2/4. So, mix that together. We just want this to get evenly distributed again. It seems like this is a little bit drier than the last one. It's not making as nice of a dough. I think what I'll do here, because I don't like how dry that is, I'm going to add just a little bit of water to it. Let's say 1 tablespoon of water. Hopefully this will moisten it up a bit and bring it together. It seems to be sticking together a little bit better. That's better. Alrighty. So when you look at the dough, one of the things that you'll notice is that the surface of it is a lot shinier than the last one. Okay, that's probably just because of the oil that's in there. So we'll make this up and then see how it turns out. So I'm going to use some cookie sheets and I'll use my black scoop again, and then I can compare it with some of the other ones. Right, so while you're doing this, make sure that you do your 2 in one row, 1 in the second row, and when you're done with them, we didn't mix it a ton, so I'm just going to press down on the tops a little bit to try and make them more cookie-like. So what you gotta do at this point is just press them down a little bit. So just gotta do the second sheet and then we can put those in the oven. Okay, so we got our 2 sheets of cookies ready. So now I can put them into the oven. So what I'm going to do again, I'm going to set the timer for 6 minutes. Once that goes off, I'm going to switch the tops and the bottoms so that the bottoms of each will get cooked properly. The cookies are done. I let them sit on the counter to cool down for about 2 to 3 minutes again. Okay, so this is what they look like. It's interesting, they look similar to the ones made with butter, although these ones look like they puffed up quite a bit more, so it should be interesting to look at them completely once they've cooled down. First impression though, it looks like a cookie, smells like a cookie, must be a cookie. Once these have cooled down, we'll break them open and take a look at them and see how they taste. Alright, so once you get these off, we're just gonna wait, I don't know, say 5 minutes, and then we'll take a look at these ones and compare how they turned out as opposed to the butter version. Okay, so it has been enough time, so let's take a look at them side by side. Okay, so remember that these ones were made with butter and these ones were made with oil. If we look at them side by side, there really isn't much of a difference. Okay, they seem to be about the same amount of thickness. It looks like the texture on here is pretty similar to what you see on here. These ones seem to have a cracked surface a little bit more. I really wonder what that would mean. Okay, so let's break some of them open. So if we take a look at the butter one. Okay, this is what we get. That's a really good crumb. Okay, so this looks like it turned out pretty well. It's crunchy on the outside, but it's soft on the inside, which is good. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. Okay, this was the oil version. So when you break it open, it's interesting. It has a bit of a more cakey texture to it. You can see that it's more fluffy than what you saw in the other one. Let's see if it'll focus on that. Right. Okay, so let's look at them top to bottom. So this is the oil-based version. This is the butter-based version. Okay, it seems subtle, but there's just a little bit of a difference. For some reason, the oil-based version is fluffier, so the butter version seems more dense. This one seems more airy. Let's see what it actually tastes like. Okay, the oil version is still crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. So really, I don't think there's a way of going wrong with this. Okay, I would say if you want something that's going to be more crispy, I'd probably use the butter, and then if you want it to be more cakey and fluffy, I would use the oil version. Okay, so either way you go, you're going to get a good tasting cookie. So go forth and try out one of the two and see what you think. All right, so again, here's the cookies. What do you think, Olive? Do you want a cookie? You can't have a cookie though. Well, you can't have these ones, they have chocolate in it. It's not for puppies. But that's okay. You can have this cookie. Here you go. That's a good girl.